We have our eye on Parliament Hill right now, where billions of dollars in emergency aid for students hangs in the balance. Here's a live look inside the House of Commons. We are taking you inside in just a moment. A small group of MPs are debating how the government should help students during the COVID-19 crisis. Under the proposed legislation, students would be eligible for $1,250 a month from May to August, more if they're caring for a dependent or if the student has a disability. That benefit is also available to students who have jobs but are making less than $1,000 a month. Opposition parties argue, though, there are gaps in the bill or problems with it. The government needs unanimous consent to fast-track the legislation, so what are the Liberals willing to do to get it passed? Carla Qualtrough is the Minister of Employment and Workforce Development. She joins us now from the House of Commons foyer. Hi, Minister. Good to see you. Thanks for your time this evening.
Well, thanks for having me.
Let's just start off with the fact that you do need support from the opposition parties to move this ahead. Do you have that support right now?
Yes, we do, and we've worked very hard over the past days and weeks to make sure that the concerns of the other parties were addressed, and that collaboratively we've made this bill as best as possible for students in Canada.
So let me just delve into a bit of why you might have that support, and if you could clarify the points of the bill that drew the support, that would be helpful. The NDP, for example, was asking for students who have dependents or who have a disability to see an increase. They were going to get $1,750 a month. They wanted it to be equal to the CERB, so $2,000 a month. Will that be in the bill?
That will be in the regulations, but we committed in a unanimous consent motion to that additional $250 per month for students with permanent disabilities and students with children.
So the argument the NDP had put forth was that why should a parent who isn't a student get more access to financial aid, or get more financial aid, period, than a student? Did that argument persuade you, and why not start from that place?
Well, a couple things. First of all, because we've always looked at this as a package of measures, so it isn't just income support. It's a potential service grant opportunity. It's a potential access to more Canada student loans, higher grant in Canada student grants so that we don't have to repay back. So this wasn't just an income benefit. This was a number of initiatives targeting students that collectively was quite generous per student.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess the point the NDP was making, though, was where the income support specifically is concerned. Parents, whether they be students or not, should not be thought of any differently.
Right, and we agreed with that, and so we were happy to increase that by $250 a month. And that was, that's the whole point. When this works, when we work together, we actually make things better. And so we were happy to agree to that.
The NDP has also used these kinds of changes to underscore the point they've been making from the beginning, which is that the CERB from the start point should have been so broad as to include all the stuff we're talking about right now. So why are students even getting less than somebody who needs the help and is not in school type of thing? Why not just start from a place of more universality and avoid all of this sort of laying out measures and then having to change them?
Yeah, and I appreciate that perspective, but what we really focused, and we chose very consciously to focus at the beginning on workers who had lost income and lost their jobs in particular, partially because we were asking people to stay at home, but also just because where the economy was heading so quickly, that we decided to give more to people who we deemed at the time needed it the most, as opposed to giving a lesser amount to a broader amount of people.
The Tories, as far as their support goes, you say that you have the support of opposition parties. They specifically wanted changes to address incentivizing work. So to ensure that students who could access this income support were also looking for jobs. How did you address that concern?
Well, a couple things. First, I'll preface it by saying that we agree. We don't want to put in anything that disincentivizes work. So what we put into the law were things we were already doing. So we agreed that in the attestations, people who are seeking work would have to attest to the fact that they are, in fact, looking for work. So like when you're on EI, you have to actually be committed to finding a job. And the second thing we put in was a commitment to link people who are getting this benefit to our Canada Job Bank, so employment opportunities. Again, we're doing that, but we were happy to legislate it for more certainty.
So just to be clear, though, because there were a number of students who were saying that they were concerned by the suggestion, that they didn't feel as though, there are very few jobs out there. That was their main concern. All they'll have to do is click a box that says, I am looking for work.
So there's three kinds of students at play here. There's those who are unable to work, there's those who are looking for work but can't find it, and then there are those that are earning under the threshold of what's currently $1,000. And so for the students that are seeking work or looking for work, they're going to have to attest that they are in fact looking for work.
But there's just a test. They're not going to have to show any documents.
Absolutely. In the law, it's written as an attestation.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to make sure for our viewers who are joining us right now, they're seeing a box at the corner of their screen. That is the update being provided by Premier Scott Moe in Saskatchewan as to the spread of COVID-19. We're going to bring you there live after we finish interviewing Minister Qualtrough, but the minister has only a specific amount of time, and we wanted to make sure that we asked her some questions about this very important legislation. I do also want to ask you, Minister, about something Premier Brian Pallister said today around the CERB program and even the student aid. I'm going to play for you a clip and then get your reaction. Here's the Premier.
We are fighting against a federal program that is actually paying people to stay out of the workforce right now, and I don't like the fact that that is real, but that is real. Employers have told us, small businesses have told us they're fighting against a federal student program that actually pays people to not work and not look for work. This also is a disincentive.
So the Minister is saying that he has heard, and I asked him about this, I've interviewed him, it's going to air in a few minutes. He's heard from various business organizations that businesses are worried about the reopening process and being able to hire employees who they claim would rather be home and taking the money from the program that you're offering than back at work. He's not ascribing any sort of motive there, but that's what he said. What is your response to that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, students want to work and they want to contribute to their communities and they want to serve. And of course, as I said, we're not trying to disincentivize work, but the reality is there are less employment opportunities out there, and students needed some level of income support so we can ensure that they could pay their bills this summer and have the opportunity to go back to work. But it's also why we're creating an additional 116,000 jobs through our various Government of Canada initiatives, in addition to the 70,000 through the Canada Summer Jobs. Are we going to create more? We'd like to. If the problem is that there are too many jobs out there, let's solve that problem. I'd love to have that problem. But in the meantime, we have to make sure that students get the income support they need. I kind of reject that students would rather sit around at home. I don't think that's the case. I think students want to serve, which is why we've created the service grant, and they want to work, which is why we're trying to create these opportunities.
Have you heard at all from businesses like the Premier says he has who are concerned about trying to make sure they're staffed for reopening? I've heard more third party, so people telling me what they've heard, but I challenge that, and I would hope that if they provide meaningful full-time opportunities, and especially if they avail themselves of the wage subsidy and may even be able to pay students more, there are solutions here where we work with all these different programs together and we make sure that students get the work opportunities that they're looking for. You mentioned a moment ago, and forgive me if I've got the number wrong, 116,000 jobs that your government says it will create. How do you know that's the exact figure that you're going to create, and by when?
Well, that was what we said we would fund last Wednesday when we announced the big package of student measures. As I said earlier, it isn't just an income supplement, it's an income supplement, increased Canada student loans, increased Canada summer grants, and increased opportunities for employment. So we're targeting 76,000 jobs additionally through our various measures, in addition to postdoctoral placements and student placements within universities, which should be around 116,000. Of course, I'm looking at other ways to create more jobs and working with different sectors like agriculture. But again, that's where we want to focus, get people working.
When you talk about 116,000 jobs, though, are you saying those are all new jobs? I'm just trying to understand in layman's terms. The government is saying you're going to create 116,000 jobs. By when, and how will I know if that actually happened?
Well, and first of all, I'll say we'll fund these jobs. So employers might have them right now, and we'll apply through our programs to have these jobs funded. They're not all necessarily new jobs. They might be existing jobs that maybe they shut down 2 months ago and they're going to ramp them back up. I'm not necessarily concerned that these aren't brand new jobs. What's important is that we fill these jobs and we give students the opportunity to do them, because that's the goal, right? Like, as I've said, we need to keep people attached to the workforce. So when we do get through the public health crisis, we're ready to get the economy back up and rolling.
Before I let you go, Minister, you are in charge of employment in this country. Tens of thousands of workers in the oil sector are out of work. Your government has announced some help for the oil sector vis-a-vis funding for cleaning up abandoned wells. Is there more coming, and if so, when? And I note that the Premier of that province today, Jason Kenney, said, I don't know what the holdup is.
Yeah, I would say exactly what I just said, and I used the example of agriculture, but I could have used oil and gas. The idea that we are looking at how many jobs we can create, whether it's through a sectoral stream like agriculture or oil and gas, but the idea is we want to invest in job creation to get everybody ready to come out of this in the best position we can.
Minister, with respect, I don't really understand what that means for the oil and gas sector. Does that mean that there is more financial aid coming in order to create jobs? And what kind of jobs would they be beyond and what's going to be generated by the Abandoned Wells program?
Well, what we're looking at it on a sector-by-sector basis is the opportunities within the current labor market realities to fund jobs. And so in oil and gas, it will look different than agriculture. And as we look sector by sector, we're going to make sure that we fit what we know is out there and actually doable with the support we give to each sector.
But what will it, again, though, Minister, what will it look like in the oil and gas sector? And I'm asking specifically about that because you know that the effect is so pronounced in that sector right now. It's right across the board. Sectors are hurting, but they are taking a double whammy with the depression, the severe depression of oil prices as well.
And I don't have specific details to share with you other than we're looking at it, but it's also one of my driving forces to make sure that people whose EI claims have exhausted since January 1st can apply for the CERB, because that will really help oil and gas workers.
Do you have any kind of timeline for people who are watching in Alberta right now as to when you might have specifics on that, Minister?
I would say within a week.
Within a week. Okay, thank you very much, Minister. I appreciate your time as always this evening.
Thank you. Take care.
Debate is underway over how the government should help students weather the COVID-19 storm. The initial proposal put forth is a benefit worth up to $1,750, but opposition parties are putting forward proposals to improve the bill. So what about it needs to be changed? Jagmeet Singh is the leader of the NDP. He joins us from the foyer of the House of Commons. Hi, Mr. Singh. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I want to ask you about this bill, but if you don't mind, I just want to ask you about what I was talking about with my colleague, Catherine Cullen, because you've been pretty outspoken about some of the positions taken by your colleagues in the Conservative Party. When you saw Mr. Sloan's criticism of Dr. Tam, what did you think?
It was wrong. It definitely is a type of commentary that fuels some of the racism that we're seeing that's already directed towards Asian Canadians. And that's absolutely not what we should be doing as parliamentarians. It's wrong. We should be finding ways to come together and unite each other.
He says that it was legitimate criticism of the actions and the decisions taken by Dr. Tam where the spread of COVID-19 is concerned, some of the advice she relied on through the World Health Organization. What do you think of that defense? I mean, he says he meant nothing racist by it.
Having concerns about the way we've responded to a crisis is one thing, but asking whether or not she's loyal to Canada or to China really is purposely inflammatory and seeking to divide people, and there's no excuse for that.
What do you think of the Ontario Conservative caucus saying he has to apologize?
It's up to them to decide. It's just, I'm here to say it's wrong.
Okay, let me move on to the student legislation. I spoke to Minister Carla Qualtrough earlier in the show, who said that she had accepted the NDP's ask for the benefit that is supposed to be $1,250 for students, but students get a little bit more if they have a dependent, so a child, for example, or a disability. They were going to get $1,750. They're now going to get $2,000. Is that your understanding?
Right. So what we said on the beginning is that, first of all, there should just be a universal benefit that anyone who needs it should be able to apply to it. We're in a crisis. The priority should be that we get help to people in need and not the Liberal approach, which seems to be focused on excluding people. They're obsessed with finding ways to exclude those who they think don't need it at the risk of people who desperately need it falling through the cracks, and that's what they've shown. And in this case, I don't understand their logic where someone who is single gets on a CERB gets $2,000, but a single mom that chose to go back to school gets $250 less. It just seems outlandish and ridiculous. In addition, someone who's a student that's living with disabilities probably has more expenses, not less, and somehow the Liberals thought it was okay to give them $250 less to a student that is living with disabilities. Again, just an arbitrary and callous decision to give less to people who have these challenges. And it's not like if you're a mom of a child that goes to school, you get a discount on your rent or your groceries or any of your other expenses.
Yeah, I take that point, Mr. Singh, but is it accurate to describe their motive as callous? I mean, they agreed with you eventually, right? They've amended the bill or added something to it that recognizes that.
They've done it, but let's think about their thought process. They thought it was okay to give a mom, a single mom who goes back to school, $250 less for no reason, when they're unwilling to commit that a company that's registered in a tax haven should not get public dollars, that they should change the laws that allowed Loblaws to effectively get away with not paying back $400 million in taxes because they were legally using a tax haven. We're saying, why don't we go after those hundreds of millions of dollars if it's a question of cost? And instead, they're willing to be callous about the single mom getting some money or a student with disabilities, but they're willing to say, no, we're not going to commit to closing loopholes that allow billions of dollars from the corporations that use tax havens that avoid giving back to Canada. That to me seems completely wrong and ridiculous.
Yeah, I do want to ask you about the tax havens for sure. I heard you ask the Prime Minister about that earlier today in the House of Commons. But I guess I just have to stop for a second and challenge the notion that they're purposely being callous. And only because I look at the statistics, for example, with the CERB, even though you have argued that it's too narrow, there are still 10 million people who have access, or 10 million applications that have gone through. That doesn't sound very exclusive. On the student front, there are it's a suite of programs they put forward, not just the income support, right? So if you are volunteering, you can access more money as well. There's grants for people attending school, low-income kids going to school, right? Like, it's not as though this is it.
It is callous. Why the two-tier system? Why not just say, if we're in a pandemic, we're in a crisis, the goal should be, how do we help as many people as quickly and as simply as possible? Instead, the Liberal approach has been, let's exclude certain people, admit that we made a mistake and then fix it, exclude some other people, admit that we made a mistake and fix it. Why wouldn't it be the inverse? Why wouldn't it be, let's make it as broad as possible so that everyone who needs help gets it? And instead of focusing on nickel and diming students or single moms who are going to school or students with disabilities, why not focus the attention on the hundreds of billions of dollars that are being lost to the Canadian coffers? Why not focus on making sure there's no tax havens? Why not change the laws? We're willing to support the government to change the laws so that Loblaws doesn't get away with not contributing $400 million in taxes. The CRA went after them for $400 million in taxes. A simple change in our tax system would allow that money to be recouped. It is callous. It is absolutely callous in the face of hundreds of millions of dollars being lost in revenue, that the government doesn't instead focus on that, but wants to go after a single mom, wants to go after a student with disabilities. That's where they're going to make their priorities. Their focus on excluding some people and saying that students get $1,250, not the $2,000. All of that is callous and a weird view of the world where they want to judge who is deserving and who is not, when we have this wide open sphere of potential revenue that they're completely ignoring. And I'm saying I'm ready to pass any law that allows us to close those loopholes.
So does that mean that you won't support this legislation?
Well, I've made it clear that after, at a minimum, they realize the complete injustice of not giving a single mom the same amount as a single person that's on CERB, that I've said I will support this. But I still believe the best way forward is to flip kind of the Liberal priority upside down and say we should be developing programs that are simple, accessible, that help everyone in need, instead of trying to carve out one group and carve out another group and have a striation of who gets more and who gets less. All of that makes no sense. The Liberal approach to this is a weird view of the world where they think some people are deserving and others aren't, when they completely miss the billionaires and those who have hundreds of millions of dollars and ignore that waste and that loss of revenue, but go after the people who are the most vulnerable.
I'm confused, though. If their approach is so terrible, why are you supporting this legislation? Well,
I'm saying that we fought to ensure that at least that single moms and students with disabilities get $2,000. We're going to continue to work to make sure that students get $2,000, but we need to get help out to people immediately. So this is a compromise position to ensure that at least some support gets out there. But we think it's wrong that the government doesn't just give a universal benefit that anyone who needs it can access. I've said that from the beginning, and I'll continue to say that. Just because I believe that's the right thing to do, I don't want to stop some help from flowing, but I absolutely believe that the Liberals are taking this in a weird way that doesn't actually give the best care to the people who are in most need, that they're approaching this in a way that seems to be callous and not really recognizing the struggles that people are faced with.
Do you have any way to quantify how many people they've missed? I mean, we can see that, for example, as I said, 10 million applications have gone through the CERB. More than 40,000 businesses have applied for the wage subsidy. If the approach is so wrong, how many people have been missed?
Well, we know anecdotally, again and again, we hear examples of people that are missed, and then the government says, okay, we'll fix that. In the beginning, we said that seniors, people living with disabilities, students, owner-operators, sole proprietors, all of these people were missed. And then the government admitted, yes, we've missed these folks, and then agreed to our motion that said, okay, let's fix that. But again, why not go the other way around? In a pandemic, shouldn't the goal be to make sure no one is missed? Shouldn't the goal be to make sure we get help out to everyone, instead of carving out some people, admitting it was wrong, then coming back to Parliament to fix it, then admitting again it was wrong, and then coming back again to fix it? That approach is not the approach I would expect of a government that is in the middle of a crisis where people have lost their jobs, where people are struggling. The goal should be the inverse. The goal should be, let's give help to everyone in need. And if there is in any situation where someone who is very wealthy gets some help, we can absolutely figure that out. But we're in the middle of a pandemic. Let's figure that out next tax season. Let's worry about people who need help now that aren't struggling, that aren't worried about how they're going to pay rent, about how they're going to pay their bills. Let's make sure they get the help they need right now.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Singh. Appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.